But oftentimes we think that only the grand gestures will make a difference. And I think that you can start with your family, you can start with your place of work, you can start by just starting to be curious and think about all of those things is a great place to start without having to put yourself out there, be completely vulnerable, and honestly set yourself up for failure.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 198 of the Running for Real podcast. I am excited you are here. I'm excited we're at episode 198. That means we are 2 episodes away from 200. And I do have something funny to start off with to tell you about. I actually recorded this episode yesterday thinking it was episode 200. I did this whole 30-minute talking to myself. I'm sitting in my closet right now, talking to myself, thinking that I was recording episode 200, when in fact I realized, or actually I didn't realize, my podcast editor Jeremy realized that the 200th episode is another 2 away. And so I had all my wires crossed. I had all things that I'd said wrong. This episode is going to be coming out 2 weeks before I thought it was going to. So here we are recording again, and I can't remember what I said yesterday. So it's just going to be, I'm probably going to miss some things that I said yesterday, but I'll probably add some things that I missed yesterday. So thought I would start off with a bit of a funny story for you. This is the first episode I am recording since having my daughter Chloe. She is 7 weeks as of this recording, although by the time this comes out, she will be 9, maybe 10 weeks old. So that's really weird for me to think about that she'll already be at that point. But here we are. I did tell you guys multiple times that I was going to take 3 months off. And so I don't want you to yell at me because, as I said, 9 or 10 weeks is not 12 weeks or 3 months. But Chloe came so much later than I expected that I actually used up a month of my maternity before she arrived here. So I am going to have to get going a bit earlier, but that is fine by me. I have to admit that I'm feeling a bit of the itch. So if you are joining me for the first time and you have no idea who I am, my name is Tina Muir. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you, but I would imagine most of you are returning guests. And I was thinking about it for episode 200. I would love to announce some of the people who have listened to every episode up to that point. So if you are someone who has listened to every episode, I have no idea if that's realistic or not. Maybe that's 50 of you, maybe that's not even 1 because 200 episodes is a lot. So if you have listened to all this being 198 episodes and you're going to listen next week and the episode 200, let me know. Send me an email, tina@tinamuir.com. I would love to kind of give you a shout out for being the most super loyal fan. So thank you for being here. I'm going to kind of go over some update things that I want to share with you. But first, I just want to take a minute to go thank our sponsors, and then we will be right to the episode. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I appreciate this brand so much. They put a lot of time and energy and effort, and they sweat the details so that we don't have to do that. We are just left with quality products that are durable, that last, that just feel... I can't describe it, but the material is so comfortable. I want to wear it all day long. And I love seeing when my friends are wearing Tracksmith clothes just in general day-to-day life because of that exact reason. I actually heard really funny the other day. One of my friends was wearing a Tracksmith shirt and her daughter said, "Mom, weren't you wearing that shirt yesterday?" And I loved it because she said, "Yeah, I was, but it's still fine. It's still good." And that's kind of the best testimonial that they could come across. Her 10-year-old daughter just happened to be asking her that. And I love that I was there for that moment because it truly, the quality, the materials, the comfort, they do last better and not need a wash as often as other clothes. And they last. That's just what Tracksmith is all about, is getting quality products that last. So I've been loving hearing that you guys have been enjoying it. And if you haven't already taken advantage of their special offer, you can get 15% off as a Running for Real listener by going to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir. That's tracksmith.com/Tina Muir and use code Tina. You will get 15% off. You can also flip it and go to tinamuir.com/tracksmith. And I have my favorite items there on the website for you to go click through. You can also hear the story of how our love story, if you want to call it that, of how Tracksmith and I came together, which is pretty cool. So you can read about that there. Now, I just want to tell you one of my favorite things I am loving right now is the Horizon tank. And there's nothing like the soft kind of worn-in feeling of a cotton tank. But cotton and sweltering heat doesn't exactly go well together. Tech fabrics can offer lightweight wicking performance, but it can also feel stiff and kind of tacky. But this is made from a dry release fabric. The Horizon tank combines the comfort of cotton and the weightlessness, the quick dry properties of polyester. The result is you've got this sophisticated tank that's soft, wicking, durable, and whisper light. And again, I want to remind you that Tracksmith has created a special offer for Running For Real listeners that is 15% off your first order by going to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir using code Tina. Going to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir using code Tina. That will get you 15% off your first order. Go check it out. You will love them. I certainly do. Okay, so I know many of you have been asking how I'm getting on. I haven't been responding to emails. I haven't been doing anything other than I am doing social media now. However, I did delete it for a month. I'll tell you about that later. And I am doing my weekly email newsletter, which I am really enjoying. And I give you some recommendations of things I'm enjoying, things I'm watching, things I'm reading, products that I have loved that week, and not sponsored products necessarily, just things that I've found that I loved. Like a few weeks ago, it was some recycled plates for my daughter. Plates made of recycled materials for clarification there. I have no affiliation with the company, but I just found them cool and I shared them. And then it's some kind of thought or thing that I've been thinking about for the week. So you can go to tinamuir.com/subscriber. I've had quite a few of you subscribe lately and say, I wish I'd done this sooner. I'm loving these emails. There's almost 7,000 people on that list. So I would love to make you another one of them. That was a really long-winded answer, but yes. So I did my email newsletter, I did social media, and that's it. I didn't do anything else during that time. And the social media break, I took a month away, had scheduled posts, but it was amazing. And I really appreciated it. And it just changed so much about my mindset and my thinking. I did a lot of journaling, which I really, really enjoyed. I took time aside to write how I was feeling. Not so much like, Bailey ate bananas for breakfast and then we walked down the road kind of thing, but really what's on my heart, what's on my mind, kind of working through some things, why certain things bother me, and what could be causing that, and just kind of really going into my mind a bit more. I really enjoyed that, and I have been keeping it up, and that social media break gave me that time, and I feel ready to kind of go further. And you're going to hear more about that in a minute. But I want to tell you a bit more about just kind of an update, as it's been a while since I have updated. And then I'll go on to kind of what's on my heart. I want to share some big things for you about, what I've been admitting, what I've learned, some confessions for you, things I've messed up, mistakes that I've made, and how I want to rectify them. So I'll tell you about that a bit more in the episode. But let's first go over the update. So I'm just checking my brief notes here because I had a lot about episode 200, which is not applicable anymore. All right. So when I recorded the episodes that you've been listening to, the pandemic kind of COVID thing was just at the very beginning. We didn't really know what was going on. I think Molly Seidel was the last episode I recorded. And I think I recorded that maybe mid-April, maybe even early April. So a lot has changed since then. Obviously, none of us expected this world to kind of be in the situation it's in right now. And it's a different world coming back to this after that time and thinking about the future. And I'll talk a bit about that later. But I did give birth to my daughter Chloe in early June. She is another good sleeper, which I'm very thankful for. But she's also pretty clingy during the day. So I guess that's a price worth paying. But I really am not able to give her to anyone else very often as of recording this message. I am sitting in the closet, as I mentioned. in my new house because I don't know where we are going to be, where it's going to be my office. I do currently have my office in the dining room, but those of you with kids can probably figure out that's probably not a very good idea because children walk past often. You know, she sees me at my computer, which I don't really like. She asks me to play and I feel guilty, and that's not really going to work when I'm trying to actually get back into work. So we're going to have to figure something out. But right now I'm sitting in the closet because it's the best sound in here. Where was I going with that? Oh, yes. So she doesn't really want to be on anyone else. So she's with my husband right now. But if she cries, I may have to cut this short. So that's just going to be my life right now. Life with two is a lot tougher than life with one. Just kind of the scheduling, trying to find time for you. And I know it will get easier. And I know this time is so fleeting. So many people have said to me the time flies by, and I can absolutely see that. But right now it's pretty intense. But thankfully, again, she does sleep well at night. So that is good. So I said I was going to take 3 months off. And as I said, I mostly have. But I've been missing it. I really have been looking forward to getting back to doing some kind of work because I love connecting with you guys. I really enjoy getting to know people. I know it can feel a bit one-sided with the conversations because it can feel like you get to know me and I don't really get to know you. But when you reach out to me, when you respond to my emails, when you respond to my messages, it is nice for me to get to know you as well. So I do feel we're a part of this community and I am really thankful for you. Actually, on that note, I was told by one of my listeners, Michael, thank you for reaching out to me about this. If you have been enjoying the show but have not yet left a review, could you do that? I would appreciate that. And I'm not going to backtrack and I'm not going to justify that because as we learned from Professor Maya a few weeks ago, I need to ask for what I want. I need to not apologize for it. And if you've been appreciating this podcast, leaving a review is a great way of kind of showing your support for me. So thank you for that. I should go back to that. It's been a bit of a strange thing having a baby in a pandemic. Not sure I ever particularly imagined that. However, in many ways, it's been kind of nice because I would have been at home a lot anyway. And it's just made it easier because everyone's at home. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on things and I don't feel the pressure to get going again. I can just take my time. We can be home. We can find creative things to do, which has been enjoyable. And I miss my family. It's been really hard not having my parents come and meet Chloe. And honestly, I don't know when they will meet her, I should say. And my sister is pregnant. I don't know when I'm going to get to meet my new nephew, my first nephew. Actually, Steve has a nephew, so I should say that. He's also my nephew, my first blood nephew. And I'm sad that I'm going to miss him, miss meeting him for who knows how long. But otherwise, it's been good. It's been special to have the time with Bailey. And I'm not saying in any way that I wish this time would have happened. Obviously, none of us wish that. There's a lot of negative that's come out of this, but I have managed to find little glimmers of light during this time. And it has made me appreciate a lot more and allowed me to kind of crack open in the way that I'm going to share with you now. So I can feel myself changing pretty fast. This has been a pretty emotional time. And I know many of you who are parents are going to be like, there's hormones raging around your body. And yes, that's true. But I think we can all also feel this heaviness that is just kind of in the air right now. I think we all go through waves of desperation and kind of, I can't take this anymore. It is quite a stressful time. And there's a lot of weight to how we're feeling. And I think it's okay to admit that it has been a tough time. That I'm going to add more to that in just a minute. But I've also felt a lot of shame for not noticing sooner about what I could have done to help with systemic and systematic racism, racist policies, how I was contributing to that, and still, honestly, technically, how I'm still contributing to it. And I feel shame for that in some ways. And I shouldn't feel shame. Brene Brown says that shame is about who you are. And guilt is about what you've done. So I should say I feel guilty. And I do, because I had tried to talk about how to elevate Black voices and how to kind of help with equality. I had actually had podcast guests on the show about this. But I have to admit, I wasn't really listening. I had the intention. I know I had the intention. Back in episode 148 with Nelly Acevedo, I I wanted to talk to her about it. I tried to think about how I could do it, but I just didn't have the right words. I just didn't know what to say. I also should have used that as my kick when I did feel uncomfortable, to be like, I need to educate myself, I need to learn. However, I didn't. I just let it slide. And then I could even go back to 2016 when I interviewed the founders of Black Girls Run, Ashley Hicks Roker and Tony Carey, on Run to the Top, because that should have been another reminder to me to kind of learn about things. I remember specifically bringing them on the show because I wanted to do what I could to help Black people get into running and enjoy running, and kind of educate my audience on what these women were doing, because it really touched me and I found it amazing. But I actually went back and listened to that episode, and I cringed when I said at the beginning, oh, have you noticed things seem a lot more inclusive lately? So embarrassed to hear myself say that. I interrupted them. I tried to steer the conversation. And yes, I understand that I still do that sometimes. I still talk in circles, and I'm trying to work on that, but it's something that is just part of who I am. So if you probably know by now, you have to just get on with that part. During that episode, I was so worried that I was going to say the wrong thing that I gave them very little space to respond, or we didn't really go anywhere beyond my scripted questions. And I understand part of that is because of my growth as an interviewer. I understand now, I'm a better interviewer now, at least I hope I am, than I was then. But part of me wasn't prepared to be uncomfortable to talk about these things. I wanted to, and I know I did. That's why I wanted to have them on. But I was too scared of putting my foot in my mouth that I did not leave any dead space or any kind of space to allow them to kind of go off in any kind of tangent or to talk about anything deeper. So I know many brands and businesses are speaking out about racism right now, and that Black Lives Matter do matter to them, that they're committed to ending racism. But I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like a lot of it is just kind of empty words. We've seen things like that before, and I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be that. I want to make long-term changes. I want to commit to doing this for good. I want to do everything that I can to make the changes systemic and systematic and long-term, and not, Steve kind of always correlates this, especially with me, of trying to push the boulder up the hill. He says, I tried to push the boulder up the hill myself, which means going at it full speed and then getting burned out. And then the boulder comes back flattening me. So, and I think that kind of relates very well to this idea of undoing and changing the way that things are, particularly here in the US, but also wherever you are. I'm sure you see some aspect of this within some kind of subgroup of your community. And actually, on that note, I want to add that I'm talking primarily right now about Black people and people of color. However, this also applies to sexuality, to class, and to trans people, to all the minority groups that are kind of left out and have to face a bit of a tougher situation than the rest of us. So yeah, I want to make these long-term changes. I want to do everything in my power that I can to make a difference and to keep going with this. And that's why I'm going to tell you about some long-term changes that I'm making, some commitments that I'm making to really become a habit and to do things that I can to elevate and to help kind of raise things for Black people and people of color particularly. Now, on that note, you're noticing that I'm stumbling over my words. I don't really know what to say exactly. And I'm sweating right now because I'm nervous that I'm going to say the wrong thing. I probably already have or will do in this episode say something that's going to offend someone. And that's the whole thing of this being uncomfortable and it being something that we don't want to do because it doesn't make us feel very good. So that part of us is always going to want to shy away from this because it does feel uncomfortable, and our body and our mind and our soul wants to get back to that kind of safe zone. And so I'm going to mess up. You're probably going to mess up. It is uncomfortable. We're not going to say the right things, but it's better that we're trying and we're doing something about it than just kind of shying away and burying your head in the sand. Because I know, I can admit, I've been doing that over the years. I'm sure you have too. There's so many things. Once you open your eyes to this, once you read and educate yourself on this, you will see it everywhere. And I do see that. I see racism interwoven into everything in my life. And now I see it, I can't unsee it. And I really struggle with it, particularly living in somewhere like St. Louis where there is a lot of segregation. It's really hard for me to live with it now. But I have to deal with that discomfort, knowing that I have contributed to things and I want to do what I can to be an anti-racist as much as I can to change things. So yes, I know many podcasts and many social media platforms and kind of people in a similar situation to mine with businesses are saying, I'm going to have more Black guests on. I'm going to add more people of color to my lineup. And I will be doing that. You will hear that I'm going to have for the next at least 4 weeks, I'm going to be having Black people or people of color as my guests on the show. I am embarrassed at the lack of people of color on my show in the past. I pride myself on finding the unique interviews, but I have to admit I did not do a good enough job at all with diversity. I commit that to you, and you can hold me to that. If you notice that I do seem to be slipping back on that, you can call me out for it, tell me about it. But I want to go beyond that, and I want to show you this as a change for life, and it really is. So I'm not just talking about being nice to Black people, trying to treat people fairly, but the systemic aspect. And I totally get it. It's overwhelming at first. I know that. I still feel that. I would love for you to go read and educate yourself on your own. But if you're not already, I suppose. But if you can't commit to that right now, I will be covering things in episodes that I hope will help with that. So during this time away, the time from social media, the time I spent journaling, just kind of growing into myself, I've decided that I'm going to be myself no matter what. I'm going to talk about the environment, even if it makes people roll their eyes, because we live on this planet and we are killing it. It's dying. And the world that our children and our future generations are going to live in is just, we think this is a pandemic that's a once in a lifetime thing, but there's going to be many more of these. And it breaks my heart to think about my kids coming to me someday and saying, why didn't you do more? Why didn't you change things? And so I am going to talk about that because that is important to me. And especially right now with the waste, like when I think about this pandemic, you're not allowed to use reusable things. You're not allowed to, I think about all the masks that are being used and just thrown away every day. Think about all the plastic, all the waste, all the takeout food that people are getting in just plastic containers. And on the note of plastic, I really don't think plastic is being recycled right now. I sense that, and this is just me in my opinion, I sense that most recycling is probably just being burned right now. And what is that doing? So I am going to be talking about the environment stuff. I am going to be talking about people of color, talking about uncomfortable things. I'm going to be bringing trans people back on the show. I had Amelia Gappin years ago, and I want to kind of bring her back on and bring a few other people on. And I want to talk about different groups that have been neglected. I have done that in the past, and hopefully you recognize that I really try and make an effort to bring on different perspectives, and I seek those people out, Rosalie Fish being a great example, because I want to highlight their stories and do what I can. However, I know I haven't been doing as good enough job. I will admit that, at times it was about chasing downloads or chasing the big guests to build my ego. Look at who I interviewed. But it's more important to me to have these important conversations, to learn from these people who are doing amazing things to change the world for the better, to make it better for everyone, not just for themselves. Don't worry, it's not all going to be serious. I still plan on covering all kinds of areas and doing silly episodes and things like that. But I'm not going to be holding back on myself. I promised myself that I would be me, or at least I want to try to ignore that voice telling me to be quiet. You're just going to get me. And I want to say, if you hear these episodes and I don't speak to you, then that's okay. Someone else is gonna be connecting with you on a different level. And I would love for it to be me. I would love for me to be the one to kind of educate you on topics or help you see different perspectives with the guests. But if that's not me, go find someone else who does inspire you, because you've got to do you. You do what's best for you. And even when it comes to these conversations we're going to have about Black people and racism, if you're not ready to have this conversation, if you feel like you're shutting down, then go away and do some reading on your own. I don't mean go away like get lost, go away kind of thing. But I mean, take some time to yourself. Think about your life and what you want to do in this world. And that's okay if I'm not the person that's gonna help you understand, but someone maybe will someday. All right, so what am I going to do to change some things? As I said, I'm going to do at least a month of Black people or other people of color because I should have done better at it. So I need to do some more work on featuring people who, not necessarily picking them because they are Black and, I just need to fill a quota. But I feel like Emmanuel Acho actually summed it up best thinking about it. So he said, if someone is given a 200-meter head start, the only way to make it a fair race is to allow the other person to catch up. Although Black people have been told they are free to run, we cannot act as if it's a fair race when they were held back for hundreds of years. And then he goes on to say, white privilege is having a head start due to hundreds and hundreds of years of systematic and systemic racism. It's having a head start intrinsically built into your life. So for that reason, we need to do things to make it a level playing field. We need to allow people to catch up. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. It's not going to be about chasing people with massive followings. It's going to be about finding people who inspire me, who are doing things that are changing the world, even if the reach that they have is very small. I want to help elevate them to give them the platform to reach more people because their message is inspiring me and others. And I know it could really help change the world. So that's one thing. I am taking your recommendations. So if I already have some wonderful, amazing, smart, funny people lined up. But if you know of someone, let me know, tina@tinamuir.com. I'm also going to be giving away a free sponsor spot, one of my three sponsor spots for each episode to a Black-owned business, primarily, if I could, a female Black-owned business every week for the rest of the year. So if you know a business I could highlight, reach out, tina@tinamuir.com. I've been spending this time reading, listening, learning, undoing, kind of really diving into this topic a lot. And not just about racism, but just about all people and how we can treat all of one another better, because the humanity aspect, we lose it so easily. We start seeing people as other. We start seeing people as the enemy. And I don't want to do that. I'm trying to be open-minded, and I've been actually speaking to people who do have different opinions to me lately, and not to tell them what to do, but to learn and to understand from them why they think that way and what is going on in their mind, not to correct them, but just so I can have that empathy and understand. So I'm going to continue to do that. And I have created a list of resources that I've found helpful. So you can go to tinamuir.com/anti-racist. And I want to make a promise to you right now. I'm going to keep on learning, keep on adding to that. Now, I want to tell you just a fact that I found when I was researching for this episode, which is that $171,000 is the net worth of a typical white family in the US, compared to $17,150 for the average Black family. Now, that shows the effects of the accumulated inequality, the discrimination, as well as the differences that we see in power and opportunity that can be traced back to when this nation began. So that Black-white wealth gap, it reflects this society that hasn't and doesn't give equality to everyone in the country. So I know many of us are at a rough place with money right now, but Black people have been at a disadvantage for a very long time. So for that reason, if you are a person of color, I want to offer you 25% off any product or service on my website. Send me an email, tina@tinamuir.com, and I'll give you the code for that. Now, I'm a white person. I do not wish to speak on behalf of Black people, as I'm never going to know what it's like. No matter how much I learn, I'm never going to get that experience. And I've said what I've been working on and what I pledge, but I wanted input from a friend. So I've asked someone, a previous guest who you know, to come back on the podcast for the final part of this episode, just to kind of have a bit of a starting conversation that we can go from there to having conversations with other people. So we're going to discuss some things we can work on. We're going to get right to that episode. And I want to thank you for listening to my rambling up to this point. Thank you to Generation UCAN for supporting me and Running For Real. I've been using UCAN for several years now because it is a stable, stomach-friendly fuel for my running and busy life. I love adding UCAN to my smoothies for a long-lasting energy boost or grabbing a bar when I'm on the go. And I can't always eat immediately before I go, so I love that I can always just grab one of these while I'm on my way out the door. Actually, speaking of that, recently I was running so late that I was eating a bar while running to the gym. My gym is thankfully quite close to where I live, and I was running along the road from my house to the gym eating my Generation UCAN bar. Didn't have any stomach upsets, but that shows you, one, how determined I am to get my UCAN bar in, and two, how good it is for the stomach that I didn't have to worry about that, even though I went straight to the gym and then straight out on a run after that. I absolutely love these UCAN bars, and there's a new UCAN Energy Plus Protein energy bars as well. So you can go visit generationucan.com to try it out and save 25% on your first order with code TinaMuir25. And if you're already a UCAN fan, you can save 15% with TinaUCAN15. So that's code TinaMuir25 for 25% off if you are a new user. Or if you're already a UCAN fan, you can save 15% off with code TinaUCAN15. Now, I've made it pretty clear that I absolutely love these products. I said about having them in smoothies. I put 2 scoops in my smoothie every day that I have with my daughter Bailey, throw some leafy greens in there, throw some orange juice in there, throw a variety of frozen fruits in there, and a spoonful of almond butter. And that's how we love to have our mid-morning snack smoothie. And I love that Generation UCAN is a part of that and helping me to add in that protein, which I'm not the best at getting. I want to thank Generation UCAN for sponsoring this episode. And remember, you can go to generationucan.com and you can use code TinaMuir25 for 25% off your order if this is your first time using it, or TinaUCAN15 for 15% off if you are already a UCAN fan. Alison, my friend, I am so excited that you be the person that I can welcome myself back to the show. I'm probably going to stumble over words, and we have a third guest you can tell us about in a minute. Although, for anyone listening, this is a really long intro. For anyone listening, there's actually 4 of us in this conversation. You will hear in just a second who those other 2 are. But welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining me here.
Thank you, Tina. It's great to see you back, and I'm honored to welcome you back into, I guess, postpartum work life.
Yes, I know. And it's a bit earlier than I intended, but someone decided to hang in there a bit longer than I thought. So she took away a month of my maternity while I was still pregnant. So tell us who, he joined us last time. He loved it so much that he's come back for a second round.
Yes, and the most special guest here is my son, Corey. He turned 1 last week. Yeah. So he's being very quiet right now, but he's gotten very vocal. So there'll probably be some conversation from him. There he goes.
That's okay. And I also have Chloe on my chest. So for everyone listening, you definitely have we have a bit of a risky show here. But this is such an important thing that I wanted to add into the conversation. So I know it's not going to be perfect, but this is running for real all over. And so I want to do the best that we can here, despite the situation. Everyone knows we're in a weird place with quarantine. So or just even staying at home. So hopefully we're going to do the best we can. All right. So last time you were here, we just scratched the surface of covering what you do, how you've empowered women. And I'll encourage people to go back to that one if they haven't listened to it. But since we last talked, things have changed. And you've kind of become the face to represent Black women in the running community. Your face is everywhere, your voice is everywhere, which is amazing, and you deserve it. But how has that experience been? I mean, has it been overwhelming? Has it been thrilling? I realize now, I asked you that question before we started recording, but we never got to actually say the answer. So I'm hearing it for the first time now. So please tell us.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's been all of the above. I think it's been thrilling and exciting because this is the kind of work that I've been doing for a long time. And, it feels like there's finally an opportunity for folks to be listening. Of course, the unfortunate side of that is all of the recent events that built up this climate where the conversation sort of had to happen, right? So the circumstances that have led to this point are, tragic. But I think that this has really been an opportunity for me to bring together my schooling, my experience, and then my love of the running community to, offer an opportunity to have these difficult conversations, offer my voice. And I think something that is most exciting for me is that I'm also learning along the way, right? I'm finding that because I really find this work so engaging, I'm reading every day, I'm reading articles, and it feels like this really is a moment where things could change. It remains to be seen because it's still very early, particularly if you look at the running industry and sort of the awakening that has happened there. But it does feel different in that folks are joining the conversation in a way that they hadn't before. So I think it's a really, there's an opportunity here for some serious change.
Yeah, and I personally think we are seeing some of that. And since we last talked, you have actually signed with Oiselle, which was an amazing thing for them to do, to kind of really not just say their support, but show their support for you and all that you're doing. But, you said about having these conversations. Was this something kind of years ago all along that you and others kind of have had in your mind that you wanted to talk about, or did you not even allow yourself to kind of go there because you just didn't ever really expect the world to be open to conversations like this?
So for me personally, when I was in graduate school getting my master's in counseling psychology, that's the time that where I really started to develop language around these conversations and sort of a framework and how to approach these conversations for folks who maybe aren't familiar with this space. Because part of my training was looking inside and being curious about my own prejudices, being curious about my own, thoughts around. So you start to look at, okay, this is, my class privilege. This is my, how I'm perceived because of my gender. This is how my race influences who I am. And so by doing that sort of investigation into yourself, it allows you to feel better comfortable having these conversations. So I think that coupled with just my life experience, it's always been something interesting to me. And, truth be told, with my Black friends, my Black and brown friends, these are conversations that we have. Like this race is just a part of our life. And whether you are a DEI consultant or not, as a Black and brown person, you have had experiences that allow you to have informed conversations, right? So I think that these conversations have been going on for a long time. It feels like, though, this is, for many people, it's the first time. For many white people, it's the first time that they're having these conversations. And I'm of the mind where, this is the long road ahead, but we need everybody on board. So the folks who are late to the party, come in and let's get to work.
So on that note, where are we now? Most people would have seen there's protests and, there's kind of a lot of conversations going on about it. People have signs in their yards, things like that. But, what is happening? And for someone who is confused, why are protests happening right now and what are they trying to do?
Yeah, so I think that, what's the way that I see it is, the recent deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and countless others has sort of, coupled with the political climate that we're in, with the president that we have, and then COVID-19 sort of reached a boiling point where Black people and brown people and allies sort of had reached the limit of what we were willing to tolerate, right? It has been too much for a long time, but it was just sort of, when you're making tea and then it bubbles over and it just, people had to go to the streets and really demand justice for George Floyd and for all the many others who have been killed, and to do it in the name of hoping for some kind of systemic change. So when I talk about systemic change, I mean thinking about the ways in which the policies are structured against Black and brown people, whether that's in education, whether that's in home ownership, whether that's in access to voting. There's so many folks who have, imposed obstacles to get out to vote intentionally, right? So I think that's where this energy is coming from, just feeling like enough is enough. Also, COVID-19, everybody had been inside. There are all these disparities around who was getting infected with COVID and how pre-existing conditions may be based on where you live and what the pollution is like, how that created just more and more trauma for folks. So that's what I see it. When you've been protesting inwardly or more quietly for so long, finally you reach your breaking point. And I think it's interesting you bring up the piece about folks having signs in their backyards. And for me, I just recently came back from a trip to Seattle and seeing people with Black Voters Matter signs and other signs centered on social justice. For me, it was a signal that I was in a space where I'm going to be okay, right? Like, it doesn't guarantee my safety, but it lets me know that there are people who are thinking about me. My son has a lot to say right now.
I love it.
But the signs are sort of a sense that you're not in danger, right? And I think that for folks who put the signs out there, those are allies, and those are people who want to signal to the community that this is a place where you're welcome, and this is a place where people will stick by you. And again, I say that the signs don't mean a guarantee of safety, but it really is a meaningful gesture to let folks know you're okay on these streets, given the nature of what's been going on the past several months.
For sure. And I think you're right that it is. I like to think that kind of is a sign that people are. I was actually talking to someone about someone this morning about how putting a sign in your yard, or really, even speaking about it on social media is, you have to be pretty passionate about it, I guess, to make a stand like that. We're not willing to do that about many things in our lives. So to take a stand like that, it really does kind of show that things are shifting, because people are willing to go judgment from, people who aren't willing to have the conversation or are willing to do things that maybe they wouldn't have done in the past. So that is definitely good to know. And, we hear there's a word being thrown around a lot right now. And for someone who has no idea what this means, but keeps hearing the word colorblind, could you explain that? Just because that is something that if you're just at the beginning of your journey, you may not have any idea what that kind of means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, being colorblind and colorblind racism is really the idea that many, many people think that when they're saying that they're colorblind, they think that they're saying something that's good or that's right. So, For example, it might go like, I don't see race. I don't see you as a Black person. I don't see you as a white person. I only see the human race, right? And so, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think when somebody says that, what they're really trying to say is that, they're not racist, they're not prejudiced, and that your race doesn't have an impact on how they treat you. But what they're really saying, when I hear somebody say that to me, I'm saying, well, you don't see me, right? Because while race is a social construct, there's no genetic truth to race that says that people are different. We actually are far more in common than we are different. So while there's no scientific genetic difference, the truth is, me being Black has informed my experiences in the world. It's informed how people look at me. It's informed how people treat me. It's informed the opportunities that I get. If you think about segregation and Jim Crow and the way that Black and brown people are treated by police, all of that is informed by how I look, right? Like, so therefore, when I hear somebody say that they don't see race, one, I know that it's not true. And two, I understand that they're just at the beginning of their journey of understanding how to have these conversations.
Thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. I am loving this all-in-one daily drink to support better health and peak performance. So even with a balanced diet, it can be difficult to cover all of your nutritional bases. We know that, right? Especially in quarantine when the goodies, the taste goodies, are just so easily at reach. We can just easily grab for the snacks. I know Reese's Pieces and some other sweets that I have had around lately have been going down a little bit too fast. But that's where Athletic Greens will help. The daily drink is kind of like a nutritional insurance for your body that's delivered straight to your door. It's developed from a complex blend of 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients. It's a greens powder engineered to help fill those gaps in your diet. The daily drink improves everyday performance by addressing the 4 pillars of health, which are energy, recovery, gut health, and immune support. It is packed with adaptogens for recovery, for probiotics, digestive enzymes, gut health, and vitamin C and zinc citrate for immune support. It's an all-in-one solution to help your body meet its nutritional needs. So I've told you so much about how much I'm enjoying it. I told you that I used it as my prenatal. I'm still taking it now as my prenatal for breastfeeding. And I'm just really a big fan of the product. I've made that very clear. Now, I want to tell you, I have been telling you about getting 20 packs for free worth $79 as your kind of freebie when you sign up, but I'm going to give you a different offer for a little while, something that I also believe is equally important. So when you try Athletic Greens through my podcast, they're going to give you up to a year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2 for free. As we know, we get vitamin D from the sun, and it's also often recommended as an important supplement by gut health experts, particularly in the winter months. But the Athletic Greens vitamin D3 K2 combines these essential nutrients to help support the heart, the immune system, and the respiratory system. So whether you're looking to boost your energy levels, support your immune system, or address your gut health, this is the perfect time to try Athletic Greens for yourself. So just go to athleticgreens.com/Tina to claim my special offer today, and you will receive the free D3K2 wellness bundle with your first purchase. That's up to 1 year supply of vitamin D added value when you try their delicious and comprehensive daily all-in-one drink. You're going to be hard-pressed to find something as impressive as that anywhere else. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Tina. Okay, so for someone who's saying, all right, the changes that we've been making, the conversations about racism and how it is kind of in every element of our lives. And I'm sure many people listening will attest to this. Once you start reading, start educating yourself, you do see it everywhere, in everything. And you start looking at every decision, everything you're making in a different way. For someone who's thinking, okay, this is totally overwhelming. I kind of can't stop seeing things. I can't stop thinking about things, but I have family members. I know this is not your problem to solve, but I have family members who are very not interested in learning, and they don't see things the way that I see things. I can't risk my conflict with my family to say something. Would you like to say anything to those people? And again, I know this is like for anyone who has been doing the education, this is the ultimate thing. It's not your problem to solve. This is our uncomfort. This is our discomfort, our kind of thing to figure out. But do you have any advice that you would give someone who kind of is feeling that way? They want to speak out. They want to say something. They have been educating themselves, but there's that fear that they're going to be judged.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody who's in that position, I would say, welcome. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And the unfortunate thing is that as you do this work, as you become anti-racist and challenge racist systems around you, you will lose friends and you will lose family, right? And I think it comes down to understanding what your values are and positioning your life in a way that you live by your values. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to, who knows how you interpret this, but for me, that doesn't mean that you never talk to your mom and dad again because they're Trump supporters, but maybe you create strict boundaries around what kind of conversations you have and what you'll tolerate, right? If you, maybe you limit the time that they're around your kids for fear of what they're going to say, or maybe you make sure that topic of voting is just off the table. But I think that the goal here is not for you to end up isolated and ruin all of your relationships. The goal is for you to live with social justice centered in your life and for you to align your values, or for you to align your life with your values. So that means setting boundaries. That may mean that folks are going to leave your life, but that discomfort and those difficult conversations, on the other side of that, you have Black and brown people who are dying, right? Like we are dying because of white supremacy. We are dying because of systemic racism, which means we don't have access to the resources that we need. So trust when I say there's discomfort all around. Mm-hmm. And these are the kinds of choices that you have to make. Yeah.
And I agree. And I've already started to lose people. I'm sure I'm going to lose more people after having this conversation today. But you kind of have to ask yourself, is this something you're going to look back on later in your life and kids or other people say to you, or even yourself, what did I do? What did I do to change things? What part did I play? We look back now on the stance that Martin Luther King made, and just and Malcolm X, and all the people who stood up back then. And we're going to look back on this time and say, how was I a part of the change? So hopefully, for me, I'm prepared to be on the side that I feel is right for me. So for someone who's thinking, okay, I want to educate myself, but I'd love to read books, but I just don't have the time. I don't have the time to sit down and read. What can I do? I want to add before you say anything, just uncomfortable conversations with a Black man. Everyone can find 5 to 15 minutes to watch one of those at a time. But that's something I've really enjoyed. But what would you say someone can do if they just don't have the time to read?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would say, and I don't mean this as a critique, but it's to really look at where this work falls in your priorities, right? And so recognizing that a commitment to anti-racism is work. And so if this is something, and I'm not saying I have a difficult time reading. You hear my son right now, right? And he's not on any kind of nap schedule. So you just sort of do what you can. But so for me, that means waking up even earlier. So I wake up at 4 a.m. so that I can have a little bit of time to read. Maybe it means audiobooks, but it does take an examination into what's important. Again, aligning around your values and how you can make time. The other thing is that, which actually tends to be rare, cross-racial relationships, right? Like the older we get, the more we look around and we realize that everybody is the same race. Everybody might be the same socioeconomic status. But in the instance that you do have close cross-racial relationships, this might be an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody who you care for and who you love and say, can we venture into this relationship where we're going to have these difficult conversations? And before you do that, if you're a white person, think about if somebody were to come to you and say that about your marginalized identity. So let's say you're a white woman and a white man came to you and asked you that question. How would you want to be asked that question, right? Because you also have to understand that it is not the marginalized person's job to tell you everything they know. But if you have a connection to them, if you have shared love, shared history, there's a likelihood that that person would say yes, right? Like with you, Tina, there's not many people who I've been on tons of podcasts, right? But I have boundaries around what I will say and how I'll speak to the person and what I'm willing to offer based on relationship. So, keep that in mind. This might be an opportunity for you to explore race in conversation with folks you're close to. And then the last thing that I would say is, just that there really is so much information out there and is humanizing folks, right? So I think that, for example, transphobia and ableism are two things that are also so prevalent. And oftentimes you'll find that the most hateful, the most transphobic people are people who've never seen a trans man or a trans woman, have never actually been in conversation, right? And so I think people like Chris Mosier, who are public figures, you can follow them on Instagram, and you can engage with their work without having a direct relationship. But now you know Chris, and Chris is an amazing human being. So it sort of chips away at that ability just to say, look at those people over there, right? Yeah. Now you know somebody, you've humanized what that looks like, and that's the first step.
That is the dangerous place. Oh no, you're okay. That is the dangerous place that we're in right now, because the dehumanizing aspect is a lot of what I think is kind of going on with all the toxicity, is that a word, in our environment. Is just everyone is seeing everyone as the other, but like the other side of, you're either this or you're that, and the other person is the other. But you as in a marginalized group, and as you mentioned about sexuality, gender, ableism, all those other kind of minority groups, in addition to race and ethnicity, have always kind of had that feeling of being the other. So I think a lot of us are kind of going through that right now. But again, humanization, as you said, is always going to bring it back to reminding you that at the end of the day, there's a human under there. So and I
think the other thing is, is to come with, we're all going to make mistakes, and I make mistakes all of the time. And, I'm not somebody who's for cancel culture. I'm for accountability culture, right? Where you can call somebody out, call them in and have a conversation, because ultimately I want change. I don't just want people to disappear. But I think if you come with a genuine, with a sense of love and curiosity and interest, that's different than coming from a hateful place, right? So I just think a lot of it comes from being thoughtful and and recognizing that you're going to be imperfect, but that you can make a sincere apology and that you can grow and move on. Nobody's going to do this right, quote unquote, right the first time.
So what if someone is fearful that they're going to get kind of attacked online for saying the wrong thing, either by someone of their race or not? Like, you know, it kind of goes both ways. There's a lot of people out there who are feeling in a very vulnerable position right now and are kind of ready to pounce. So what would you say there?
Yeah, I agree. And I think what you said is right on, right? Like folks who have been for other folks who have been really, bear the brunt of the racism, for folks who have been marginalized, for folks who have experienced racism or any other ism, we can't really fault them for how they respond, because there is a lot of built up resentment and anger when you're faced by these systems of oppression, right? So I think I would say in that instance, maybe your first step is not to comment publicly online, right? I think even offering to reach out to somebody via DM, because things can get really charged very quickly on social media and they can escalate very quickly. You can't account for somebody's tone. You can't account for, you know, if you don't know the person, you can just get lost in the cycle of toxic trolling commentary. So I would offer that online may not be the best way to engage in the conversations. It's a place where you can get information. And then from there, I would try to DM, and always the more personal the communication you can get, the better, right? If you can engage that person via DM, you can engage that person via phone. But if that person does not want to engage, then you also have to respect that too, right? Like we're all in different places. We all have, we feel our emotions differently every day. And that's what sometimes it's just backing away from that conversation and trying again another time.
Okay. Thank you. So any other things for someone who is saying, okay, what can I do in my everyday life? What actions can make a small difference? You mentioned yard signs. That's obviously something. What about sitting next to a Black person on a train? Is that something that someone should be doing? Or is that kind of like, now you're being racist in a different way because you're saying, okay, there's a Black person over there, I'm going to go sit next to them, rather than just getting on the train and sitting wherever. And the same with kind of seeking out, you said about having interracial relationships. What if someone is looking around and saying, well, I don't have any people of color as friends, but do I go walking down the street, see a Black person and say, hey, will you be my friend? Like, what would you suggest there?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the examples, and I'm laughing because it's important to speak explicitly like this, right? And I'll just say something that my teacher said to me we had a conversation about allyship for my Meaning Through Movement tour. And she said, first and foremost, don't be weird. Don't be awkward, right? So I could see why you might feel like, oh, like there's a Black person, or there's a this, or there's a that. Let me go talk to them. But at the end of the day, don't be weird, right? So I would say that I think a really good place to start is by, looking at your inner circle. So whether it's talking to your parents, whether it's talking to the friends that you have, start engaging in conversations right where you are. I think oftentimes people feel like they have to go big, right? Like I have to have like 10,000 followers and I have to be posting on this online every day. That's not the case, right? Like you can start reading and start grappling with these issues on a smaller level. And I think that actually allows you to insulate yourself as you're having your first encounters, right? Like I wouldn't advise, somebody actually reached out to me and they were completely clueless in this process, but they're like, I don't know anything about race. Should I start a podcast about it and have guests on the show? And I said, no, you shouldn't start a podcast on something that you have no knowledge of, right? Like you should start small. But oftentimes we think that only the grand gestures will make a difference. And I think that you can start with your family, you can start with your place of work, you can start by just looking at, if you're affiliated with a brand, if you're an athlete affiliated with a brand, who's on the board of that brand, right? And who's at the table, who are you having conversations with? And just starting to be curious and think about all of those things is a great place to start without having to put yourself out there, be completely vulnerable, and honestly set yourself up for failure. Because this is a really painful and long process of being anti-racist. So in the process of this tough work, be kind to yourself too.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for saying that, because I think that is something that white people can be very fragile, and particularly women. And I think, that was one thing that was hard for me to read when I first started doing this work, probably about a year and a half ago, was reading things that kind of said like, we don't want your tears. And I'd be like, well, I can't help that I have tears, but like, it's true that people, we do cry quite easily. So,
but the other thing is like, and it's because white tears have a certain impact in a room, right? Like when a white woman cries, all the attention is diverted. That doesn't mean don't cry. By all means, Tina, with your family, and I'm saying you, but it's not you.
No, go for it. Be honest with me. I'd rather.
With your family and with other white people, like have those tears and cry and really let it out. But just know that when it comes to conversations of race and other Black people are talking about the pain and harm, your tears in that moment divert all of the attention away from the harm that we're discussing, and it goes towards you. So always be mindful of, my energy in this room. What are the ways in which I, as a white person, can suck all the energy out of the room, right? But then create places where you can have your emotions and feel what you feel and be comforted by folks, who you're not competing with, quote unquote.
Yes. No, that makes it clear. Thank you. All right. So you have been doing some amazing things to help with this movement. I already mentioned you've just been all over the place, and I just want to tell everyone at home that I've said so many times that at home. That's weird. I said at home. Where am I? I want to tell all the people listening that Alison has not only been doing all this stuff to help and to really grow the conversation and just, promoting awareness and everything, but I really, really admire you. You know that for so many things. But one of the things you've been doing recently, which I think people will really respect, is that Alison protects her time in the same way that I tell you guys to make sure you have self-care, to make sure that you do things that, are good for you, like removing your phone from situations, putting your phone away. Alison, you do just such a good job of that. And I really, really respect that about you. Your career is blowing up, and yet you still are making sure that you have time for yourself and your family. And I just want to let everyone know about that, because that is such a rare thing to keep, as you're so in demand right now, but you're still carving that time for yourself. So I really respect that of you. Tell people where they can go, find more about you, and learn some of the events that you're doing through Meaning Through Movement.
Yeah, so the hub for all the information is Alison, M as in Mary, Desir.com. You can also find me on Instagram. And from there, you can get linked into the work that I'm doing with Meaning Through Movement and some of the other communities that I've built. But to your point, this is a new thing for me, making time. And I think it really does have to do with my son, right? Like I can only do, you hear him, right? Kids are so demanding.
Attention, please.
And I think what I realized, and what we were talking about before offline, is that the time is so short, right? Like they're only small for so long. And the last thing I want is for him to remember that, well, my mom was always on the computer. That. So that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make for him.
Okay, well, we will let you get back to him. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you so much, and encourage everyone to once again go find Alison and follow what she's doing.
Thank you.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. Okay, so that wasn't the smoothest episode I've ever done. Not even so much because of the clunkiness of my questions, which, yes, was definitely in there. The first part where I had Chloe on me, I definitely was struggling to pay attention, which is why you will notice that the second part of my interview with Alison, she was gone because I just had to go give her to Steve, despite Bailey crying and being whiny. So he had to deal with that. But I apologize that, that wasn't as clear cut and the audio wasn't as good as it usually is. However, that's real life right now. Alison is incredibly busy, and I was very fortunate to get some time with her because she is very in demand right now. And so I wanted to get the opportunity because I felt like she was the perfect person to ask about it. Did not get to all the questions that I wanted to ask. And I will be kind of addressing some of the questions about racism over the coming months. So if you actually do have any questions that you'd like me to ask an upcoming guest, I would really appreciate you sending me an email, tina@tinamuir.com. If there is something related to racism that you would like me to ask, I would appreciate that. And then I will try and get to it with a guest that kind of seems most applicable. Now, that being said, I'm not going to be focusing just on racism over the coming months. I am going to be having multiple interviews with Black voices as the feature over the coming months, but it's not going to be a focus on racism. I will ask a few questions of them in the interviews, but I mostly want to learn about the individuals and what they're doing and things that they believe in and just their own running. So it's not just going to be, this podcast is still about running at the end of the day. So don't worry, it's not going to suddenly switch to social justice for every episode. So I hope you will tune in and learn and kind of appreciate the guests that I'm bringing on, because I feel very excited about the inspiring things that they are doing. And as I said earlier, I do feel like I kind of owe that to the community for not doing better at it before. So this is the first episode that I have finished recording back. I hope you did enjoy that mini interview with Alison. As I said, I've got so many things I still had left to ask her, but I wanted to be respectful of her time and also of yours, because this is already kind of getting towards a longer episode. So next week we are going to hear from Brandon Hudgens, which is the last episode Sarah is going to record or has recorded. And so after that, I will be through my maternity podcast and I will be on to recording new episodes. I want to just take a moment to thank UCAN, Athletic Greens and Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Without those sponsors right there, in addition to Ultra, I would not have been able to take this maternity break and stepped away from work in the way that I did. So I'm very, very thankful for those brands. And if you have supported them and supported me by also helping yourself by getting those products, I am very thankful to you for doing so. And that is a great way of supporting me, as well as giving yourself something that I genuinely believe in. Over this time, I've had plenty of emails from companies wanting to work with me. I think I've turned down all of them. I had one who was interested in, but has gone radio silent, being totally honest with you. But otherwise, I've turned them down because they just didn't feel like the right match. I hope you know that the brands that I do choose are brands that I believe in and I trust. And so, yeah, just want to give a thank to those brands. All right, so you can find links to everything we talked about today, or Alison mentioned, all the things I mentioned in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 198. That means we're closing in on 200. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to do, but I will hopefully have figured that out by the time you listen to this. My friends, have a great week, and I'll see you next Friday.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.